unanimously adopted this recycled water agreement with the tribe. So that's kind of the background and how it arrived to TUD. It was pretty well vetted, so staff's here to answer any detailed questions if board members want to explore it a little further.
Ron, do you have any questions?
Well, yeah, I do, and I brought them up at the past board meeting. I understand the importance of getting courts emptied every year. I've watched that progress through the years, even back when we had the MPDS permit, and we're trying to get rid of that because it was so onerous. But and when this was presented to us, the board, this deal with the tribe, the way I understood it was one of the big reasons that why this was being done besides the empty courts was that we supposedly need to get an easement, legal easement on the all the properties that we irrigate or spread the treated water. And unfortunately, I had hoped to come to this meeting with something in writing from the water board. I'm waiting on an email back that will tell me definitely that that is exactly what they're requiring for us to move forward on the regional wastewater treatment plant renovation. Because what I've been learning is that no, we don't need an easement onto the properties, and I need to find that out for sure. So that's one thing that I have as a problem. The other thing is that the agreement with Mountain Springs for raw water was not to be grandfathered if they sold it. And that's what's happening here. If we cannot supply the golf course with enough treated water, then they can make it up with our raw water. Well, that's not right. I mean, if they pay a connection fee and consumption fee and so on, become a regular raw water customer, well, that's fine and good, but not to get free raw water because we can't make up the treated water.
It's not free though. Just to clarify, it's not free raw water.
What's the charge going to be?
They pay about $70,000 a year, Director Ringen. In fact, they're one of the larger revenue payees on the raw water ditch. In fact, if they drop off the raw water, it's going to be a real raw water revenue impact because they're besides SPI, they're one of the largest raw water users. And it will continue. If they do drop off of raw water, it's going to impact the raw water revenue side, which is already not paying full cost of service.
And all raw water customers pay the same rate. There is not a different rate for a different class of customers. You're not allowed to do that. So they are a paying customer and they're paying the same rate as everyone else, just to clarify. Thank you.
Well, then we go to the situation where, well, first of all, when the, well, let me back up where I was going to go. So we didn't finish the Phoenix Lake project, so it doesn't have full capacity, and that's where the water's going to come from. It'll go down Sullivan Creek, correct? And that's where they'll pick it up.
But we actually operate Phoenix at a static level in the summer and during irrigation season. So really it's not coming out of storage in Phoenix, it's a pass through. We order up the water from Lyons, comes down the main canal, comes through the powerhouse, flows into Phoenix and right out through the dam spillway, down Sullivan Creek, and the tribe pays for the losses. So they pay for how much is delivered at the dam. What they actually receive for irrigation at the golf course is something substantially less, but they pay for that loss.
Okay, well, I mean, that's helpful to know, because I was concerned about the loss too, because I'll bet there's a fair amount as it goes down Sullivan Creek that goes to the environment. So
There may be accretions too. So we've added stream flow gauges, and so we're tracking this carefully. So it's a seasonal and a year-to-year variability, but there's a good chance that there are accretions frequently from the West Slope Sierra. When you look at these streams on the West Slope, they're receiving base flow, which is snow melt from upslope to downslope. So I don't want to just make the blanket statement that there's water losses. There could be actually accretions, and we can quantify that with our stream flow gauges. So I don't have the data in front of me. I just want to make sure everyone's clear that there may be accretions, there may be decretions or losses.
They do pay for more than they use, though. I can make that statement.
So we do charge them for carriage water from Phoenix Lake to their diversion.
okay, so then I have concerns with the cost to the TUD ratepayer. I don't understand why the ratepayers have to pay $500,000 to get the pipe from courts up there to the golf course. And that just seems like that's not right. And if we're going to spend $500,000, why don't we, off the Betty West property, take the $500 and buy the property that we feel that we need and be done with it?
Well,
And then too, or go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, we can dissect that. No, that's a legitimate question. I guess the question I would respond with is, where is the land that you would propose that the district purchase that would already be ready for irrigation, essentially, that wouldn't require the district to put forth at least $500,000, if not to extend a reclamation main and develop with irrigation. And on top of that, what land out there will we not have to operate the irrigation system after it's operational? So the tribal land provides all of those benefits. They're going to operate the system. The land's already ready. It's adjacent to TUD owned land. Yes, it does cost some money, but there really isn't an inventory of land out there that has the topography and the use that the golf course does. And it will offset raw water supply. So it has multiple benefits. There's overlapping interest between the tribe, the district, and the community and our ratepayers to have recycled water on the golf course.
And I think that was a thing that I was why I voted for this back then, was that I have great respect for the tribe, and anytime we can have a win-win situation going on, I'm all for that. Especially, if they get what they're going to need and TUD gets what they need, everybody walks away happy, and that's the way I was looking at it. But as I start adding things up, and I see some of these issues pop up, it really concerns me. And once we get through with the renovation at the regional wastewater plant, that water is going to be treated to a much higher level than what it is now. And I'm having a hard time understanding why this agreement is for 10 years when that's going to be a very, very valuable resource, commodity.
Well, we don't currently charge any of our reclamation users anything, and we are very reluctant to open that discussion with our existing users. They will be provided the same quality water when this is all over with. And so we just struggled, to be honest, Director Ringen, with how to phase in a transition in culture here in our reclamation system for people that have for over 20 years, well, a lot longer than that, like 40 years, received reclamation water at no cost. And we felt like a 10-year sort of horizon was reasonable for us to transition into that change of culture. And then potentially that could be applied to other users in the system. But we weren't ready to quite tackle that. And we feel like there is a cost avoidance value to this. Whether or not we need an easement, an actual bona fide easement, we do need dry year land bank areas. I mean, there are times when we have too much water, there's times when we don't have enough water. And in order to satisfy the demands of our current reclamation users, we needed to have the golf course be a dry year land bank. And because it has two sources of water, that's exactly what it could be. There are times when you could blend recycled water with raw water. There are times when you could flush the greens and the fairways with raw water that doesn't have the salinity that our recycled water will be. There are times when we'll have too much or too little, I should say, recycled water. Well, we can make up that difference with raw water. But by and large, if we can transition them over to recycled water, the golf course that is, we can save ourselves, over 100 acre feet a year, and in surface water that could be reallocated to domestic use, which is a higher value use. So we just saw many opportunities for the district here. And yes, it will cost our ratepayers some money, but I don't see any way it wasn't going to cost our ratepayers some money, because if it wasn't this piece of land, we were going to need to find some other piece of land, and I didn't see anything remotely similar with the same type of use. We've entertained trying to buy land before, and there just aren't these big pieces available that aren't covered with oak trees. We know our county's got a policy on oak woodland that doesn't have wetlands, that doesn't have cultural resources, that's close enough to our system. We have Egan Ranch, and Director Boatwright knows all about Egan Ranch. It had the Red Hills onion on there, for goodness sakes, at least purportedly had the Red Hills onion. Has a lot of rock, isn't the best irrigation area. And then you have a golf course right next door to us that's already being irrigated. It's ready to go. I mean, it obviously needs some modifications to deal with taking receipt of the recycled water. But when you add all these up, yes, it will cost our ratepayers money, but we're going to be money ahead in the long term. Plus, we can phase this in. In some of these other instances, we were going to have to build everything up front and then maybe sit on it for years before we needed to use it. With this, yes, we have to build some things, but we can, like I said, we can blend water. We can say, hey, we're going to deliver 30% recycled water, 70% surface water. And then as our users in our reclamation system drop off, because they will retire, they will, pass this on to their family members when they get to a certain age. Who knows if they'll want to stay in the ranching business at all. If they drop out, we have a place to go with our recycled water. And those were the benefits that were discussed with Dave Andrus and the internal team here when we decided to negotiate with the tribe. And the tribe was a very good negotiating partner. We felt like everybody did this in good faith. We came to the board in transparency. We presented all these, and it was adopted about 2 years ago down. So we're happy to discuss this, but the underlying conditions and reasons for this agreement have not changed.
Well, a couple of adds. Number one, since it's a collaborative effort and mutual benefit between the tribe and TUD, while it is contained in the reclamation extension, pipeline extensions in the CIP, the goal is to secure a grant. And I know it's in the tribe's best interest too to begin using recycled water sooner than later. That's number one. So it's hopefully not going to be 100% on the back of TUD ratepayers. But as the district engineer pointed out, and the grand jury investigated this issue. And so we provided substantive information regarding the pros and cons that Eric just went through, but also the comparison between what we would do working with the tribe and what TUD would be required to do if this golf course wasn't available. And correct me if I'm wrong here, Eric, but if we had to buy land, which Eric already talked about how that's tough to do in that West County area, extend a pipeline and then purchase an irrigation system and then pay staff to operate it, you're going to pay a lot more for TUD to pursue that rather than working with the tribe. So this recycled water agreement, just from the cost point of view, is of value to the wastewater ratepayer in Tuolumne County, number one. Number two, every wastewater utility I've managed, every utility, 100%, all requires easements. TUD's the first wastewater agency I've ever managed that is basically done reclamation through a handshake. And the reason why wastewater utilities require easements is because of the onerous regulations associated with wastewater and wastewater recycling. And the regional board does require these. So what we're going to be doing through this upcoming year and 18 months is what's called a report of waste discharge and a Title 22 report. They're very detailed engineering reports that Eric and consultants will be working on that looks at the biological loading on our plant, the flows, the mass balance of influent and effluent, and it starts at the top and it goes all the way to the bottom. So the next part of that report will be, where are the lands where that wastewater is going? Are they suitable agronomically to receive biologic loading? There's a mass balance, not only in terms of the actual effluent or the reclaimed water going on those lands, so that you don't exceed their carrying capacity for taking that water. So you got to do the mass balance on, can they take that volume of water, number one, and two, can they uptake the nutrients associated with that water? If you can, either through flow or through your constituents, then they're not going to grant you that permit. You have to demonstrate mathematically that you have the ability to reclaim 100% of that water during a 1 in 100 year event. And that's our challenge. And the regional board is going to be looking, they actually look at the parcel maps and the deeds and the easements. I mean, these are very thorough, researched engineering documents that become part of the public record that the regional board will review and actually go before the regional board. Have you ever been up in I think it's Rancho Cordova? The regional board itself approves these documents and grants these permits. And this is part of the public record. And so it's a very thorough, complex, detailed process. My understanding from Eric, and I think I looked at it, we're operating under a early 1990s, what's called a WDR, waste discharge requirement permit. And it's outdated, it's old. The regional board knows it. And since then, there's been a lot of regulation enacted. And when the regional board goes to look at our new report of waste discharge in Title 22, it's going to be using 2021 regulatory standards, not circa 1990. So we're bracing for it. We're preparing for this upcoming permit process. But I think that overall, TUD was looking ahead and down the road when Dave Andrus, who has experience in this area, began negotiating with the tribe and brought it to the board. Overall, I think it's a very good agreement. You've got an easement to secure. So even if the golf course is sold, TUD can still irrigate that land. That's the value of an easement. It has to be made available to TUD. And in that agreement, if you look at it carefully, there's a minimum per acre foot per year. I think it's 160 acre feet, maybe a little more, that the tribe has to take each year. And then there's a goal for taking something like 200 to 300 acre feet per year. And so that agreement was well thought out. As I mentioned, it came from other wastewater utilities, well vetted. The tribe was a good partner, and we reached mutual accord. And as I mentioned, I believe all of this was talked about at that board meeting. It was my first. But since I had experience in this area, I did review the agreement and did pass my muster. I mean, I've seen these before. And I think it is in the best interest of TUD's ratepayers. Now, why 10-year grace period? The only thing that I'm aware of is because of the multi-decades of free recycled water and a culture of charging for that water. And there would be this grace period that maybe some now in hindsight think is too slow. Maybe it's too quick. I don't know. But that's where that negotiation landed. The board supported that. I think that I would echo that there is the culture of that this water's free, and it's going to take some time to start changing that culture. And maybe the 10 years is appropriate. I don't know. But now that we have this agreement in place, it's bilateral. The only way it can be changed is if the tribe's interested in changing some aspect of this agreement. And I think I see Brandon Meyer on this committee Zoom meeting. So he can speak on behalf of the tribe if you have any questions.
And I have a few things that I've jotted down as we were talking, and I'm not sure if Mr. Ringen had actually finished with his questions. Ron, did you have anything else?
I think I've said the majority of what I have kind of stuck in my craw. I mean, it's like the ratepayers even have to pay the electricity to pump it up there. It just seems to me like it was an agreement that should have been done differently. And especially seeing that we're going to be providing a much higher quality treated water in another year and a half or two. Well, I hope it doesn't take that long to do the regional wastewater plant renovation. But at that point in time, then it's even more valuable. So I don't know.
Director Regan, I thought we addressed that. I mean, did you want to spend more money to buy land and in reclamation and power and irrigation system? Is that what you're suggesting?
I'm not suggesting to do that at all. I'm saying we should have bought some land. Then it's permanent. We don't have this issue. We can use it or we don't have to use it, and we could even lease it out for grazing. I mean, this is really, yeah, we get to empty courts. I like that, but I think there might have been some other ways to do it. I mean, below the dam is a whole area of redwood trees. You could be spraying that during the summer, or maybe even all around the whole year. I don't know, but
you need a permit for that, Director Ringen. I mean, this has been well vetted. You would have paid more for land. So to go back in hindsight, quarterback in a bilateral agreement now, I'm not sure how productive it is, but I think that this agreement was well vetted at the time, and it was clear based on the investigation that this is saving the ratepayer money. I mean, you can accept it for what it's worth or not, but one of the reasons that TUD went down this path was to save money to the ratepayer, and that easement is the same thing as owning land. Like I said, if the tribe decide to sell the golf course, that easement will go with the land. So you have a reliable acreage with a requirement to irrigate a minimum of 160 acre feet a year of recycled water. And that's an enormous value to the ratepayer. And you would have paid more than the cost of extending it by buying other land, buying the irrigation system and operating it. So I think that it is a value to the ratepayer. Now, the cost to get the water there, I think we talked about it, Mr. Perkins, but isn't that gravity, or does it have to be pumped at the tail end?
Yeah, thanks. I was going to ask the same question. I'm pretty sure, of course, Eric Johnson will know better, but it's, as far as I know, it's designed to go by gravity flow from the regional plant.
Yeah, I believe it's gravity.
We're
The only
working
way
through
that
those.
would actually happen
details.
is to totally consume the water for or at least 60% of the water for the upper zone to push it up there by gravity. Some of the water is certainly available, but quartz has to be used as a storage capacity vessel, and then from quartz it would have to be pumped back up.
That's correct. And that's consistent with the way the operations have been for the last several years. We've been pumping out of quartz for a number of years, but back up the hill to satisfy the demand for the upper zone as it exists now.
Yeah, that you know, as partial intermittent, you know, and that was a great benefit to the system to actually, because the regional wastewater plant flows had reduced, to have the wet season flows that can be, you know, higher, pump back up and utilizing the customer base up there. Steve, I had a question for you. You mentioned that all raw water users pay the same. Is that on the consumption fees of the raw water?
I'm not really sure what you mean by consumption fees. What I'm getting at is that there is only one rate for raw water. They are charged by whether they are metered or unmetered, but the underlying rate is the same. PUD has a rate for treated water and a rate for raw water.
Okay.
And so just their bill is going to look different whether they're metered or they're on MID. But there are no differences in classes. There are no differences for individual customers. It's the same rate.
I thought in the email for Nathan Rosasco, the connection fees are different between ag customers and, you know, just say I've got 5 acres and I want to purchase half-inch of.
Yeah, capacity fees are totally different from rates or service charges.
Okay.
So the capacity fees are set by the water rules and regulations, and Eric can address that later in this discussion. But as far as the base rate and the usage rates, the consumption rates, there is one rate for all customers. Capacity fees is a whole different area.
Okay. And then a question for Eric Johnson, the loss calculation. We charge the golf course, you know, based on the rate of water being metered at Phoenix. How's that loss calculated between Phoenix and where they draw out of Sullivan's Creek?
We don't actually calculate the loss. We just, they order up water, we deliver it through the dam, we meter it, we bill it. You know, without talking to the operators at the golf course, I wouldn't be able to exactly calculate or tell you what the loss is, Director Boatwright. I imagine they have a feeling as the summer progresses, it's seasonal, that, you know, they're ordering, I don't know, 20 miners inches. I'm making up a number right now. And that's maybe, you know, half a CFS. And yet what they're pumping out is something less than that. And I don't know how their operations balance out the difference between what's delivered up at Phoenix and what they pull out. I just know that they, in the summer, have to put more in at the top than what they're able to draw out.
Okay, and that was some sort of agreement, because isn't there a in-stream flow release that's mandated?
This is in addition to the in-stream flow. Yes, there is. Eric Hall manages that, and there is a minimum in-stream flow requirement out of Phoenix, but this is on top of that amount.
Yeah, and then, yeah, And certainly maybe that opens up a different discussion as to, making sure that the in-stream water is consistent all the way through. So currently their contract or allotment or agreement is for up to 600 miners inches? Or is that, 60 miners inches and approximately 600 GPM?
It would be a little more than 600 GPM.
That, so it's about 500 acre feet per year. I didn't see in the contract where, who has the authority to say there's, okay, there's only 50 acre feet of recycled water available this year, and you're going to have to purchase the remaining water needs as a supplemental customer. How is that covered in this?
It's a good question. Our intent would be to satisfy absolutely as much through recycled water as possible, but like we just described, there will be times when we can't. I'd have to read through here, Director Boatwright, to see the specific language and where it addresses that, but the controller of the system, the person or the entity that's deciding if there was a water supply or not, is the district. I mean, we're the operator of the regional reclamation system. So if there is a shortage, by default, we're going to fall back on raw water. Our primary preferred will be recycled, but there's also the knowledge that at times the golf course is going to want to transition to raw water only for the health of the grass that they have out there. As the salts accumulate and build up, my understanding is typical golf course irrigation, they'll want to do a flush cycle periodically with surface water. And so, yeah, but I'm not answering your question directly. I would need to look.
Well, we talked about this. We know there's going to be, there's an absence of a shortage policy on the reclamation side. And we brought it up in the last two spring meetings with the growers. And it is yet to be addressed.
That, so maybe we're in, a supplemental supply of water. The ultimate answer to this question is obviously to have more land under irrigation than what the maximum potential of recycled water available is. But that then pushes the need for a supplemental supply to make up a portion of that. Obviously,
Land out of production,
it brings into negotiations of charging for, okay, I've got to put so much water in this year, and a fee for use. Do we currently have an end use plan on the golf course? I know the contract covers that they will take that, but do we actually have full permission to put recycled water on the golf course at this time?
Not as of yet. That will be as part of the Title 22 permitting process that Ed described. Our consultant has started that process. What it involves is we're moving in tandem with the improvements to the plant, and we will be filing our new Form 200 and our new permit applications for WDR's waste discharge requirements at the plant. We will also file a Title 22 report. And because the state has changed their policy, our 2002 master reclamation permit will be replaced by what they call a notice of applicability for coverage under the statewide general order for recycled water use. And that will all happen in concert with the new WDRs from the plant. We won't have necessarily one permit that covers everything, but we will have two permits likely in the next 2 years. And in that Title 22 report that we're currently working on will be a land application, the end use plan that you're describing specifically for the golf course that addresses the setbacks, addresses when irrigation can occur, and the signage. it will be a little different because we'll be delivering, tertiary unrestricted reuse 2.2 water versus, the secondary that we have been. But the answer to your question is, that's another reason why we needed to extend the supplemental in order to make this work. Is we weren't ready on day one to deliver water to the golf course, yet the golf course has a need on day one. And we needed to have dry year land bank, and we needed to have the operational flexibility for dry and wet times and for flushing. And so, yeah, the answer to your question is that we're working on the Title 22 report as we speak.
Well, but I just want to be clear that we have the legal authority via the agreement. What we're working on that Eric's went through was the state legal permit that authorizes it on that land. But the agreement is already in place. So we're just going through the process now, and we're beginning with the state to work through this. And we need to get the wastewater treatment plant upgraded, which we're hoping to have done by fall 22.
Director Boatwright, if I may kind of jump in there, I have a couple of clarifying things I'd like to say. But to start with, I want to let you know that I very much appreciate the fact that this management team and this committee has not become complacent with this topic and the need to be on point at all times, all years and all weather types. It's very important to me and our operations, because when it's all said and done, the buck stops here with your operations manager. And so I very much appreciate this continued pointed look at it and being on top of things. I had a couple of text messages with Eric Hall regarding this loss, because I knew it was significant, but he deals with, Eric Hall, our water master, deals with the delivery of raw water to the golf course, and has for 15 years, I suppose now. So they get we sell them about 3 acre-feet a day. His estimation is they maybe get 1.5 acre-feet per day. So they lose and pay for 1.5 acre-feet per day. And that's a lose-lose situation. We don't want to, we need to be good stewards of all of our waters, and losing upwards of 270 acre-feet of loss in a reclamation season, that's irresponsible. So anyway, just wanted to bring those things to your point. And again, I appreciate everybody's concern here. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And certainly I'm not impugning that, we're not on point. It's just, this contract, it brings up a good starting point. And I'm not knocking this contract for when it was put in place, and certainly the options. If I had the exact same opportunity and a contract of this nature, and certainly everybody's looking at what would we do differently. And it's a good learning point to look at that in that respect, i.e. where I was going with the end use plan. Certainly the regional board can also go, well, we've got new area that we're going into. We're going to want monitoring wells on, groundwater for groundwater degradation. And certainly those come at a installation cost as well as an operational cost that are not currently covered under, this contract. And let's see, end use plan, cost to upkeep. That's just where we're at. Ron, have you developed any other questions that you wanted to bring about on this?
No, I've said my piece.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, and certainly be aware that the current reclamations water users certainly have had, some of them I would describe it as having their feathers ruffled a little bit. They would have liked to have had a input or at least this being open for discussion, because a contract like this will guide the future for reclamation users and, you know, put new requirements on them as well too. The new Title 22, that will affect all current recycled land use?
Yes, Director Boatright, it will be an overhaul or a wholesale look at all of our end user agreements. And because we're doing a new background groundwater monitoring study, as you're aware of, I'm not sure how that will implicate use on some of our existing areas. And that's another consideration is, you know, with CV salts and with nitrates and that kind of thing, if it changes our application rate on how much we can irrigate on some of our existing lands and reduces it, then it thereby increases our need again for more land and another location to go with recycled water. But yes, it will be a look at all land use in the entire reclamation system, not just the addition of the golf course.
But, and, you know, I would certainly, you know, put forth that we should be having some sort of preliminary discussion. We brought it up to our reclamations users in the past at annual training meetings. But just the emphasis, you know, to make sure everybody understands what the Title 22 is and certainly how it will affect the operation in the system. But Mr. Ringen, another shot for any last questions or comments?
Well, I think about the only thing that I would say is that you just brought up about our original reclamation people. I think that it would be probably a good idea that maybe this would be agendized for a board meeting and have this discussion at times so that those that wish to be educated on what's coming can be, so that don't have people like me running around thinking that there's a real inequity here to the ratepayers. And it would be nice to back it up with actual documents showing that, you know, such things as the easement are definitely something that is going to be required by the water board.
Certainly.
Well, I want to make sure everyone understands this was agendized and publicly discussed by the full TUD board with the staff report, draft agreement made available to everybody. There was no desire to keep this a secret from people. This was very transparent and public when this came about as a discussion with the full TUD board. It was available to everybody. And I know I've been involved in 2 of the reclamation meetings. I know Eric has been crystal clear about what the regional board's doing, the need for easements, the concern about the contracts, and the fact that there's really no security there. It's been more of a handshake and deal, which has worked, but those kind of deals are an artifact of the past that TUD needs to be carefully examining how it's moving forward and complying with these state regulations. And so that's all been discussed. And that was one of the reasons TUD entered into this agreement, which does seem to be mutually beneficial and beneficial to TUD ratepayers. And I know the ranchers are concerned because they have expressed some concern in the spring meetings that I've participated in, especially the dry year shortage policy, which we know is outstanding. And we've been forthright and talked to the ranchers about that at some point there does need to be a discussion about if there's insufficient water, does everyone share in the shortage equally, or is there a priority where some are made whole and others don't get any? That has not been determined yet, but it has been brought up and discussed. So I'm not sure, And then the grand jury brought this up, and TUD staff did quite a write-up because, we took those concerns and questions seriously. And so all of this was brought up, and there is a thorough write-up in the grand jury response on this issue because someone is making false allegations about how this came about. And we wanted to make clear that this was a benefit to the ratepayer, and that's why the TUD board voted 5-0 to unanimously move forward with this agreement. And I think the agreement is a guide to the future. Again, as I mentioned in my earlier remarks, all cities and wastewater entities that regulate recycled water do have easements. There's very few legacy situations where the lands aren't secured, because the regional board's going to want to know that, they know wastewater is going to be here for the next 100+ years into infinity. And you don't have a legal ability to reclaim or discharge that water. How can you guarantee to the regional board that you have sufficient land bank to be able to discharge that water? That's the bottom line the regional board's looking at. If you don't have that guarantee, and Director Ringen brought up, you either need to own the land or you need an easement. And yeah, there's City of Santa Rosa purchased land. They actually grow alfalfa on city-owned land with their recycled water. And from what I've heard, they're generating more revenue selling alfalfa than their wastewater operations. They're actually making money. That's something that other cities, I did that in the city of Ione. Instead of the city actually farming alfalfa, we leased the land to a grower who then, grew alfalfa and made money for himself. And then the city was making money on leasing the land. Could TUD do that? That's something to consider. But as our district engineer pointed out, there's not a lot of flat land out there that's away from the oak savanna woodland or the oak woodland. So it's difficult. So I hesitate to bring this back to the TUD board. I don't know what more we can say about this. It's pretty much common knowledge. The grand jury report response is out there. I hate to just continue to kind of open, say, some past wounds, but Director Ringen, you were a part of this journey from day one, and you worked with Dave Andrus. It was all publicly identified and transparently published and discussed and board adopted, all in public. So, I mean, if this committee wants to take it to the TUD board, we can. I don't see the value of it personally. It is an agreement. The decisions were made in 2018. I think what's outstanding is how are we moving forward with our Title 22 and other permits to show that we have commitments to be able to discharge water on these lands. I think our district engineer pointed out some of these agreements with the ranchers are out of date. They could literally just say, sorry, we're not taking any more recycled water. And TUD would be in a situation, an emergency situation of where are you going to discharge that water? Because you have to do it by permit, and you have to volumetrically and with water constituents be able to satisfy those permit requirements. And we do know right now with some of those monitoring wells where there's some emerging issues with salinity, nitrate, and our district engineer brought up CV salts. It sounds a little crazy. It's more of a valley issue, but unfortunately we're falling under the umbrella of CV salts, and it's a regulation and concern that the regional board has, and they're going to hold TUD accountable to those requirements. So we're happy to go to the TUD board. I'm just saying I wouldn't recommend talking about sensitive regulatory issues when we're looking at trying to do a reported waste discharge, the Title 22, because all this will be, I don't think, it doesn't require a board approval of these permits, right? We're just basically going to enter into agreements with engineers and then make application to the regional board. That's the process. So it's the regional board that approves the permits, not the TUD board.
Correct. And I'll just emphasize that whether or not the golf course was being added as a land application area, we were going to need to redo the Title 22 report anyway. So the golf course hasn't triggered this new regulatory permitting need. We were going to need to get a coverage under the statewide general order because we are renovating the wastewater treatment plant.
So I'd like to point out that I watched twice over the last couple days that board meeting when we okayed this agreement. And I had never seen that agreement or had any real knowledge of what was coming down until just a matter of a few days before that meeting when the agenda came out. And so if you go back and look at that meeting, you will see that I asked question after question after question. And because I actually read that agreement and went through it, and I could pick out things that just didn't seem right to me. And I was on every answer I was given was to tell me everything was just fine. It's going to work out just great. This is what we need. And like I said, I've got great respect for the Miwok tribe, and love to see us working hand in hand with them where it's a win-win thing. I get real sensitive when I see it's costing the ratepayers huge bucks. And this thing's for 10 years.
Well, Director Raymond, the answer that's been answered. This is actually saving ratepayer dollars. If you disagree with it, you're going to have to show us why you think it's costing ratepayers, because our district engineer provided a cost estimate to the grand jury regarding this question that shows that if TUD goes and buys land, extends the reclaimed water line, buys an irrigation system, and pays operation costs, that total cost is greater than working with the tribe. So from that analysis, TUD ratepayer is saving money. And like I said earlier, we're hoping, because it's a tribal TUD partnership, that we can secure some grants, maybe pay 100% of the extension of that reclamation line. Whereas if TUD did it on its own just to comply with permit requirements, you would not be eligible for grants. So I think there's significant cost savings to the wastewater ratepayer. I'm not sure how you continue to believe that there's a cost to the ratepayer. I'm happy if you got some facts. We would love to see it. But again, at the end of the day, this is a bilateral agreement. I don't know what you want to do. I mean, Brandon's on, Mr. Myers on this call. If you want to ask him to renegotiate an aspect of this agreement, you can make the request.
Well, I think we all realize that that's not going to happen. So, I mean, I'm just not happy with the way this thing worked out. And I guess for right now, it is what it is because it's a signed deal. And whether I agree with it or not, I guess doesn't make any difference whatsoever. So there you go.
Well, we want to make sure you're comfortable. I mean, do you not agree with the district engineer's analysis that this is a savings to the district wastewater ratepayer?
Well, it's on hypothetical information, because if we actually searched for land, which we didn't do aggressively, this may be entirely different. And then I go back to,
we actually have searched for land, and we've done a study back in 2012. We looked at all the parcels. Kennedy Jenks actually did it, produced a map of all parcels that were, eligible or suitable. We took a look and screened it by topography, screened it by soils, proximity to our system, and size. We filtered out those that were like less than 20 acres, just because it's really not cost effective to, after you look at the setbacks, to look at anything less than 20 acres. We have done that. There just isn't really great land. We've entertained trying to get land with BLM, met with them, and their land was very poor. Not to mention they wanted to apply a bunch of federal environmental regulations to the land. We've been approached by people on for olive orchards, which that's great, but olives don't use the kind of water that pasture grass does or golf courses. So that's just another issue here. Kind of one of our jobs here, one of my jobs here, is to do a what if analysis on the regulations and on the sustainability of the reclamation system, and ask ourselves, what if we get hits in monitoring wells? What if one of the ranchers exits the system? What if one of the ranchers changes their irrigation crop type to something that uses much less water? What if, and that's why this agreement is so valuable, is that it demonstrates, without any upfront cost, it demonstrates that the district has looked to secure land, which we have via contract. And when we go to the regional board to do our permitting, if we didn't have this land, they're going to ask all the questions that General Manager Pattison laid out, which is, how can you assure us as the regional board that you can continue into the future meeting growth, even if there isn't growth, but how can you assure us that you can continue to operate the system? We gave up our NPDES permit, so we no longer have the ability to use that as a safety, as a relief valve when we have wet years. So all of our eggs are in one basket. It's all in land application, and we were very, very vulnerable. That's why we went to the board and explained the value of this. There's no upfront cost right now. Certainly, there's going to be some costs, but it's less than the cost to purchase land that doesn't even exist at this point, as far as I can tell.
We hope that satisfies you, Director Ringen. There was quite a bit of work done. That's why, I basically inherited this, but I did evaluate it, and the logic all made sense to me. And so hopefully that answers all of your questions. I did jot down all your questions when we began this. I hesitate to draw this on, but you asked about the need for a legal easement. I think that question's been answered. You asked about the carriage water connection fees. I think that's been answered. You asked about the cost to TUD ratepayers. I think we answered that, and why the 10 years. That was the last question, and I think we answered that as well.
Ed, the only other question then would be, because we have an agreement to get water to a delivery point, and the agreement, states that they will use water on the golf course property. The only thing I didn't see in here is any additional regulatory requirements or costs associated with regulatory requirements, i.e. monitoring wells and ongoing monitoring. Who would cover that cost?
I haven't read it in a little while, but I know that any signage setbacks, that's all on the golf course to pay for, as well as the extension of their irrigation system. TUD is not going to be paying for their irrigation system or operating it. We will not even go on their land. So they're required to fulfill all those obligations. And I'm pretty sure that's all in the agreement, Director Boatwright.
Yeah, for that portion, but for groundwater monitoring specifically.
And I've been involved with other recycled water agreements on golf courses. And I don't believe there's a requirement for monitoring wells on golf courses for Title 22.
So that would be one area that would, basically bring both parties back to the table to negotiate an amendment to this contract.
Well, I don't think monitoring well is going to be required. That permit will require certain hours of irrigation operation. Typically, what I've seen in permits for other golf courses requires irrigation to stop 2 hours before operation of the golf course, number one. No standing water. And so the goal really is that the water balance and whatever nutrients are in the recycled water are uptake by the turf. And because of that, I don't believe the regional board, at least in my past experience with other golf courses, have ever required monitoring wells to be installed.
Do we currently have any agreements with any other reclamation users with respect to the operation and maintenance of our existing monitoring wells? Does anybody know?
No,
No.
cost burdened by the district.
Yeah.
Uh, Even the newest, mandate by the state, drilling the 5 monitoring wells, running them and coming up with a nutrient loading, and the, finally getting over the interim, what was it? The interim,
Groundwater limits.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I seen that as a very, it's huge. I think we had $200,000 just for installation and setting forth the new groundwater limits. An annual cost for monitoring well, just the operation of it's about $2,000 to $3,000 a year. And that doesn't associate with a capital expenditure of actually developing and constructing monitoring well. And certainly this, the golf course has on-site storage. So I would be shocked if the regional board did not come in and require monitoring wells for groundwater.
The difference, David, is that it's Title 22 and not secondary.
All right, but certainly, to develop that sort of thing, it would have to come back through a CIP project or other things. Mr. Ringen, are you ready to move on, or any more discussion on this?
Yeah, I'm ready to move on.
All right. Thank you very much for this presentation on this. Yeah, in hindsight, being able to look at things or seeing different opinions certainly is what has drawn us to this. I'm not, saying this is a bad agreement. And hindsight leads us to a future point of, if there's another agreement like this, certainly we should, look at any concerns and use this as a learning point.
Chair Boatright, just a heads up that the district engineer and I have another meeting at 10 a.m. that we could not get out of. And so we have until 10 a.m.
Okay, I actually had until 10:30 myself, as having some other commitments. So we'll move on to item 2, the review of the agreement and amendment number 1 regarding construction of transfer of water mainline extension and water storage tank to serve phase 1 of Valley Vista development. And certainly it's more of the.
Right. Just a clarification, there was no committee recommendation for item number 1, correct?
That is where, that is the way it is agendized here. And let's see, the recommendation is no recommendation. This item is for information only.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Ringen, are you in agreement with that?
Yeah, you're the chairman, so I'll follow you.
That, yeah, and like I said, on this one, it's a signed agreement by both parties, and at this point in time, I don't see recommending to move it to the board for renegotiation. So we'll go with the no recommendation that this item is for information only on agenda item 1.
Okay, thank you.
Move back up. So it's mainly the amendment that affects the sanitary sewer service for Valley Vista that was being brought here for discussion.
So I'll start off and then Eric can pick up. Well, let's start with the why there's a DA to begin with. And Valley Vista, it was approved by the county Board of Supervisors as infill development. I think you're all familiar with its location. Valley Vista's project proponents approached TUD to enter into a developer agreement for water. And so it's a 230 unit development that I think it's going to be constructed in phases. And that requires a developer agreement. TUD has standards and specifications for both its water and sewer infrastructure. And so TUD is very careful that any new infrastructure that's being constructed, whether it's lot by lot or by a development such as this, that it meets the standards, current modern day standards and specs, which is why TUD uses developer agreements. And it is common for all cities and utilities to use developer agreements to protect ratepayers and to ensure that we get the infrastructure that meets state law, which changes every year. They're always becoming more and more onerous, and we want to make sure we comply with state law and get the infrastructure we need. So TUD entered into this original developer agreement that looked at water looping of some of the systems, the fire flow, meeting fire flow standards. And then there was a value to include the 500,000 gallon water storage tank, which is larger than what the development needed, but because of other ratepayers in the area that could better utilize pressure and storage, it was a cost savings to TUD to include the water storage tank with the developer, where they'll be building the water storage tank and then deeding all this infrastructure over to TUD. So that original DA was reviewed and approved by the board. At the time, Jamestown Sanitary District was looking at providing the wastewater treatment to meet the developer needs for this development. And for whatever reason, their engineer basically stated we don't have sufficient capacity to treat their flows, which left the project proponent without a forthright ability to be able to meet their wastewater needs. And they approached TUD, asked if TUD had the capacity, and that began a discussion. Yes, TUD has the capacity. How would it connect? And that, and it was decided at that time it made sense. It was infill. TUD has Mill Villa, which is essentially just across the highway there. And when you consider all the connection fees, monthly rate revenues, the fact we already have systems in the area, it made sense to go ahead and offer that a DA amendment to be able to provide wastewater. So that was brought to the board. The board agreed, and that's where we stand. We're happy to answer any questions regarding what transpired and why it benefits TUD ratepayers.
Mr. Ring, do you like to start off with any questions you may have?
Yeah, well, I asked these questions at the meeting where this was brought before the board. And my one main question was, will this cost the ratepayers any money? And I was told no. The developer is going to install all the infrastructure to TUD standards. I guess our inspector would be making sure that everything went in the way it should. and then it would be turned over to TUD once it was complete. So that sounded pretty good to me. Once it seemed like it was a win-win. Get those folks going. It's too bad they weren't able to do business with Jamestown Sanitary, because I think that's who LAFCO originally stated was supposed to provide the sewers service. But at any rate, you know, now I'm started thinking about this. My real question here is, who's going to pay to pump the sewage up to Millvilla? And Millvilla has a pumping station. It's probably going to be undersized for that many new connections being pumped into it. And then who is going to pay for the power while changing over that equipment so that it is adequately sized? And then who's going to be paying to pump from there up to the regional wastewater plant?
Director Ringen, I'll take a stab at answering that question. So you're correct. The developer is installing everything to district standards, deeding it to the district. Then thenceforth, the district would operate and maintain that. Our operations and maintenance is funded through our rates. We don't have a distinction per se in rates for all of our 6,000 wastewater customers. So our ratepayers will be paying to pump for the electricity and the operating and maintenance expense for that pump station that will be constructed at Valley Vista, just as our ratepayers at large pay for all of our lift stations. I mean, you could do an analysis and look at how many connections are on each individual lift station. And let me give you an example. We have the Law and Justice Center lift station. It really serves a very small area. I mean, for the last 2 years, it's really only served the juvenile detention facility. And the rate that's paying for that is the rate paid by all of our ratepayers. So it isn't, we don't make a distinction that way. It would be very difficult. We have 29 or 30 lift stations. I might have lost track somewhere in there. And there isn't a distinct rate for each one. In terms of the Millvilla lift station, there is capacity to accept the build out flow rate that will be generated at Valley Vista if they ever build out. However, as Director Boatwright knows, that's a critical lift station. It's one of our larger flow volume lift stations. It needs to be rehabilitated. It needs to be rehabilitated whether or not Valley Vista is connected to it or not. We're planning, our capital budgeting includes a new generator, a new building, another sump, and a rehabilitation of the existing sump. That's because that facility is old, and it isn't because Valley Vista will be connecting to it. Now, Valley Vista will pay capacity fees at the time of connection per board policy. If they build out, we're looking at capacity fees, I think it's in the staff report, of over $1 million. So they will be paying for the capacity, and then they will be paying a rate. And so I think that covers all of our costs. But I do want to make sure you understand that Millvilla is a facility that could accommodate the flows as is, but the district is choosing to initiate improvements on the basis of the age and the reliability of the system as it stands right now.
So with the CIP, there's no cost sharing for the offsite projects on the development worked into the agreement?
The agreement has the developer funding all the offsite improvements in terms of the force main from the site across the highway. They're going to have to bore and jack under the highway, connecting into our system. The Millvilla improvement project, Millvilla sewer pump station project, the district is planning on doing regardless. So it will show up in the proposed capital budget that this board considers here in the next few months. And we are in design of those improvements right now. Whether or not Valley Vista comes online in the next year or next 2 or 3 years, that facility needs to be upgraded.
It's fortunate for the district that the original developer of the Melvilla estates designed and built the capacity, excess capacity. And certainly, some changes to that lift station would, even push that capacity even further with the way that it was originally designed, with a small sump and a larger sump. And then in the future to move over and use the larger sump as primary pumping. I think part of this, and again, this is another agreement that is signed and agreed to. We could have afforded the opportunity to have the contractor pay a portion of the CIP for Melvilla, based on the fact that Melvilla doesn't really need the excessive capacity. Certainly a CIP to rebuild, say at a 90 GPM reduction could have been done, but the development across the street for Valley Vista, is utilizing capacity that was originally put into the system, and we're rebuilding to that capacity set point. I think I said that correctly. Other than that, there's nothing in the agreement, and maybe that's in some other details. I would certainly have concerns for Valley Vista wastewater. Certainly the most cumbersome is going to be in the beginning, when the system has to be built to full capacity, but only runs at somewhere between 15 to 25% of its potential. Is there a more detailed point that covers things like that, such as odor control chemicals and other things put into this?
Director Boatwright, because of your past background, you have a unique perspective, and those are great questions. We've talked about the odor control issue. I think it could become an issue. Fortunately, where the facility is sited, it's not right adjacent to the residence. That's good, but we have provided some provisions. There are provisions in the design to add chemical treatment and other things, but we're gonna have to see how we go. I think the developer hopes it builds out fairly quickly. The board should know that this agreement only covers phase 1, which is only 80 lots, where we would have to move forward with a subsequent agreement for the remaining part of the development. But yeah, we're gonna have to run the pumps on a tight operating band, so that we may have to actually add some water to the sumps at night. I mean, there's, some of the options that we have available. There are other proprietary products out there that, use ozone, use filters, GAC filters, a bunch of other things, biological treatment techniques. And we haven't reached the end of that road in the design. At this point, we're allowing for some of those to be added on if needed.
Yeah, my bigger concern is not necessarily odors being generated at the Valley Vista site, but more at the Melvilla site, or the midpoint. This wastewater has already been in a force main. Now it's coming back to basically breaking the gravity pressure at atmosphere or vented tank, and then being repumped to the regional plant, which is certainly the same process is done in other areas of our system. but it's going to be at build out 33% or 1/3 of the capacity. So it certainly has a potential for onerous odors at the Millville site. But,
No, you're right. You're right. And that force main's long. It's gonna have a long residence time in there before it daylights out at Millville. That's a good point. I'm not sure we have an easy solution for that, other than maybe our design for improvements at Millville also needs to include odor control now. It's a good point.
I might add, that's a function of operations, and everybody here knows, or at least most people know here, that you have an outstanding staff with lots of years of experience in dealing with these types of things. And this challenge and unforeseen challenges, this staff, your operations staff, will meet head on and do what's right by our customers. So rest assured, if there becomes a nuisance problem, we will address it and take care of it.
Yeah, Mr. Perkins, to draw that back to where we're at is and I'm certainly sure that the operations staff is capable, but is a cost and the cost burden of, development, equipment, and then operations.
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, I do appreciate that everybody here takes the time to look at more than just operations and the cost to protect our existing ratepayers. These are some of the challenges we're just faced with this district, just the makeup of Tuolumne Utilities District. This project spans a couple of general managers and a couple of boards and several years. And, 2 years ago was the appropriate time for these kinds of discussions. But, time has passed, and unfortunately or fortunately, we're going to learn from this, and there'll be other developments probably in our time here as this team sits to take what we learned from this one and apply it to that one, just as we've done in all the decades I've been here. So I do appreciate this level of concern for our existing ratepayers and the operations staff, because even if it's paid for, we have to operate it. So as you well know.
Mr. Ringen, do you have any further questions or comments on this item?
No, I don't. Thank you.
All right. So I'm bringing that back. Let me see if I can find it in my agenda packet here. I believe the recommendation for this one was also that it is a information only. Is that correct, Melissa?
That's correct.
So, Mr. Ringen, do you agree with, accepting this as just information, or is there a desire to do something different with it?
Yeah, well, I think once again, we're stuck. I tried to ask the right questions at the time this came before the board, and I was given answers that we're now finding out is not going to be what's actually going to happen. And that's very, very irritating, and it's very damaging to the ratepayer.
Could you elaborate on that?
I got to speak up there. I haven't heard any evidence yet that there is any cost impact to the ratepayers. Number one, there's the staff report. We got to be state of the facts. So let's make sure we're all on the same page. We're happy to discuss these issues, but the simple fact is the staff report identifies over $1 million in connection fees. That's extremely valuable. The elected officials need to understand this is still somewhat small to medium-sized utility. We have massive deferred capital improvements. You guys are aware of it, over 100 million. And there's no way there's enough money in Tuolumne County to work through these. But when you get infill developments that are paying over $1 million in connection fees, it goes a long way to really help improve TUD with its bottom line, which is financing of these capital improvements. It's huge. I don't want to minimize it. Take a pause and just think about it for a moment. Over $1 million in connection fees for infill development. This isn't development that's going to be 20 miles away or 10 miles away. We literally have our operators in this area as we speak. and you're getting over $1 million. Not only are you getting that, but you're getting a share in a brand new water storage tank, a brand new lift station. I think in the agreement is a backup generator. So all of these facilities are brand new. We know they're going to have a life cycle of at least 30 years. So along with those $1 million plus in connection fees, you're also getting $150,000 to $200,000 a year in rate revenue. And that's one of the things that's really been working against TUD since its inception in 1992. We have ratepayers all over, scattered across a very large area. Our economy of scale is dramatically poor. So anytime that we can increase the number of our ratepayers and infill, improves our economy of scale and our bottom line. So to suggest that this is a cost to TUD existing ratepayers is just, it's incorrect. And it's actually a benefit. We need, TUD in the county needs more of these types of infill developments so that our, both for the county and TUD, our bottom financial line improves, our economy of scale improves. The services suffer in Tuolumne County, especially law enforcement, fire, EMS, but even on the water sewer side for our deferred CIP, because the economy of scale is so poor. So the more you get some of these infill developments, which I know the general plan identifies, these are good economic benefits to our existing taxpayers, our existing ratepayers. To suggest that this is costing TUD ratepayers is just incorrect based on the math that staff has done. It's in the staff report. It was presented to the board back when the original DA and the amendment went forth. So the bottom line, again, like the previous item, this is a benefit to existing ratepayers, and to suggest otherwise, it's just not correct. And if you still believe that, show us where staff is mistaken. But we hate to see these statements in public because it makes TUD look bad, like we enter into agreements without thinking things through, which I don't believe is the case. Staff's done a thorough analysis. This was a regular agendized item. It was publicly discussed transparently and adopted unanimously by the board. So to go back and hindsight quarterback now and suggest that these are bad agreements is harmful to TUD, number one, but two, are false. You know, I still remain convinced that this is a great benefit to TUD's existing ratepayers. So hopefully we can get you to agree with this, Director Ringen, but if you want to continue to suggest that it's going to cost existing ratepayers, we're going to disagree.
Well, you and I are just going to have to agree that we disagree. Your district engineer just got through telling us right here this morning that you're going to have to rebuild the Mill Villa pumps, and it sounds
Not
like
as a result of this project, though, Director Ringen. I said that 2 or 3 times.
That was already.
I know that, but
Okay, so it's
David
irrelevant.
Boatwright also said that it's still quite usable and was not on the radar to be replaced right away.
It was in the CIP.
So that we don't break down, and maybe just a little bit of clarification. You know, I don't disagree that Melvilla may need a rehabilitation project, but it's sizing and capacity, and Monday morning quarterbacking or hindsight in looking at these contracts. I haven't heard that Valley Vista is a bad, project, or, isn't good for the bottom line. It's what I am perceiving is that if we miss operational changes or operational challenges that will have to be met later that are not addressed in the original agreements, it takes away from that connection fee monies going into other infrastructure to benefit the entire system. and capacities fees that are brought in by developments that help us, move forward with our, backlog of capital improvement projects. I certainly see them as good. It's just want to make sure that as much of that as possible is going forward, that we're not going to have to backtrack and do, some improvements on a brand new system to make it work. But, and, I'm, prepared to accept this as, the information that was, given. But, if Mr. Ringen, you're in agreement?
I'll just go along with whatever you want there, Director Boatright.
Well, I
Yeah.
just hope the board understands there you're adding to the district's bottom line with connection fees and rate revenue. That's a win-win.
Well, rates cover operations and, capacity and connection fees help to, with our infrastructure projects. But, okay, so I believe we can move on to item 3 for maybe just a few minutes. Mr. Pattison, you had mentioned that you had a meeting at 10 a.m. That required your attention.
Yeah, Eric Johnson and I, yes, sir.
That so let's see, is that there's not a whole lot of, or there's not any Melissa, there's no paperwork or information with item 3 in the packet that I'm seeing.
That's correct.
So we'll go into it as a open discussion of information.
Yeah, if it's okay, I think I'll jump in here, Director Boatright. This is John Perkins, your Operations Director, and I asked to put this on the committee agenda just to kind of inform the committee and I guess later the board in some form. But as Director Boatright, you well know, we've been under a consent decree for almost
Mr. Perkins,
It's
skipped over the septic tank dump charge. I think it was requested by the board to talk about before the CalSPA consent decree.
Excuse me, I didn't see that.
It's okay. So basically, the reason there wasn't any information there, Chair Boatright, is that there wasn't much to provide other than, our monthly operations report provides, the flow from the septic tanks that come in each month. But I know I checked with Steve and there's about $400,000 in annual revenue from the septic dumps that go into our system. We've brought this up a couple of times as we've talked about the regional wastewater treatment plant upgrade. The new design is going to be much more user-friendly for septic users. They won't have to back up a steep, narrow, dangerous hill. We'll be able to allow 2 septic trucks to be able to dump simultaneously. We have, checks and monitoring going on. It'll be more secure. So a lot of value and benefit in the new system. And what staff was recommending was a full-scale comprehensive analysis of what the cost should be when the new treatment plant is done, so that we can be charging the correct amount associated with septics. And we know it's a county-wide benefit, and in fact, multi-county benefit. I know in past wastewater facilities I've managed that we didn't have a septic tank operation, and we actually looked at it as a business enterprise and a revenue generator. So I think there's overall value to TUD to have this operation. We recognize that the BOD's higher than your typical single family residential effluent. There's other considerations, but overall that $400,000 of annual revenue does help with the district's bottom line for providing service to our wastewater operations. The question is that sufficient to cover the cost? I talked to our district engineer. We do have a very careful engineering analysis on those costs. It is not something that was lightly done. It was carefully evaluated a number of years ago to set the per dump fee. And then each year it escalates by the engineer news record. We call it the ENR. So that every year those septic dump fees do increase, which the ENR is an index to try to cover kind of a construction cost index, because every year costs go up. And so usually, and it can vary anywhere from 1 to 4 or 5%. It's typically a little higher than consumer price index, CPI. So each year the septic dump fee does go up by the ENR to cover costs. So we think that right now, based on the revenues we're receiving, it pretty much covers the cost to be able to treat and discharge that effluent water received from the effluent or the septic dumpers and the companies that use it. So again, bottom line, it probably is benefiting the TUD ratepayer right now to have that additional revenue. As I mentioned, when we talked about the regional wastewater treatment plant upgrade, we were going to wait, staff was going to wait until it was done. So we had some experience operating it so that we could do a comprehensive analysis and update what the fair charge for those septic dump stations would be in the new facility. Since that time, though, it's been brought up a time or two by the board to consider increasing out-of-county septic dump charges versus in-county septic dump charges. And I think that's why this item's been agendized. So rather than wait until the new wastewater treatment plan is done, the board's interested maybe considering a rate change now to charge out-of-county septic haulers. There's a couple of issues with that. One, based on staff's experience, these trucks may have both Tuolumne and Calaveras County septage in it, so it might be difficult or almost impossible to differentiate. It may be more of on an honesty basis by these companies to be able to honestly tell us, what percentage or what gallon flow they're dumping into our system, because it's probably difficult to track. Because we know Tuolumne County septic haulers also do work in Calaveras, so there's some logistical issues with this. And then staff has talked about this, the pricing is elastic. It's in an economic term. It basically means, so if you start charging more money for a service, you may lose business. And we don't know where we're at on that curve exactly. I think it's probably next to impossible to really try to figure out where we're at exactly on that. If you raise it 10%, are you going to lose business? If you raise it 20 or 30 or 40 or even 50%, how much business are you going to lose? So there is some concern that you may lose business if you start charging out of county more than in county. And if you lose business, are we going to see reduced revenue streams below the 400,000 per year that we do believe benefits the bottom line of TUD existing ratepayers? And then third, if you do raise fees too much, would we be incentivizing illegal dumping into our waterways within Tuolumne County? That's a big concern. I don't believe any of us would like to see that, but you may incentivize some illegal dumping. So those are some of the high level talking points that staff has thought about when the board's looking at potentially moving toward charging higher fees for out of county right now. The last thing I'll end with is that if this committee decides to move in that direction, it again is an advisory recommendation. The board will have to be picked up by the full board to discuss and decide. But our last comment from the staff would be, if this is the direction you want to go, we think it would be smart to hold a meeting with the septage haulers and discuss this issue with them before you get too far down the path, so that everyone's on the same page and you don't kind of catch them by surprise. So that's what staff's talked about so far.
So what I've gathered from that, there is, I did not realize that the cost for septage dumping at the regional plant and went up on an annual basis. So over a period of time, is Steve still with us as far as a, you know, say in the last 2 years, how much that fee rate has gone up per gallon?
So a couple comments, David. You know, if you go to the wastewater rules and ordinances, which is referenced in your agenda, that's where the district engineers calculate the fees associated with it from a capacity standpoint. I believe that's in Exhibit I of the ordinance, and then the specific charges is Exhibit B. And so when that was done, we put into effect this engineering news and record, and it has a cap of 3.5% written in there. So it's probably averaged between 1% and 2%. But as you know, David, the actual gallonage that we've received has changed radically over the last 5 years. We had the rim fire. We had stuff coming in from that. We had the housing crisis. We now have the housing boom and all these other things. But you know, what really concerns me from, you know, a finance director perspective or from a district perspective that Director Pattison didn't refer to is what I've heard the board bring up several times, is this idea of charging Calaveras more. And I know there's probably several reasons for that, but first and foremost, we're a local governmental agency in California, and we operate as an enterprise fund. Everything we do has to have some basis for it. I can't just charge you more money because you live on the wrong side of the river. The cost to treat sewage from Calaveras does not cost TUD any more than the cost of sewage here. So if our real concern is to reduce sewage, not to generate more revenue, then I think, you know, we need to look at maybe we just ban accepting anything but Tuolumne County. But I feel like if our facility is capable of taking it, there's a need and we're satisfying it. So, you know, we don't have a basis to charge them more just because they live out there, because the cost to treat it is not different. If our basis is we need to reduce it, well, part of this new facility is we're going to actually increase the capabilities and the receivership and the cost in treating that. And we really need to get that under place before we see what the real cost is. The other thing I'll point out is that the operators, it's kind of an honor system, as you know, David, as far as them telling us what loads from where. Over the past, I've looked at for probably 5 to 10 years, we've come up with about 10%, or excuse me, 30% of the gallonage we receive is from Calaveras or outside the county. So you're looking at 30% of that 400,000 is what's coming through there. Additionally, the main operator who comes from Calaveras is actually an operator within Tuolumne County. So it's a Tuolumne County business providing this service and doing that. So I just think it's important to put into context for the board that, you know, we need to be concerned about the cost we charge is related to the cost of service. We need to look at the capacity and capabilities of doing this process and whether we want to just do it at all or we walk away from it. I mean, that's what happened to Calaveras County years back. But anyway, I think that's important for context. And I know that's more than what you asked, David, but hopefully it helps. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
No, and certainly, you know, you brought up some other good points that the sewer from Calaveras or Merced County or just to the south of us, it doesn't cost any different. That does bring me to one of my other questions. in the new system for Sonora Regional, Eric, will you be evaluating how the new system, which treats water to a higher standard, what the cost impacts there are of adding and treating the septic tank waste to the plant?
Yes. Once the new plant is online, I think internally, we would like to have a conversation with Pace. I mean, they have more experience in this area, but we're going to evaluate, we'll know what our operating costs are. We'll have to distinguish between the operating costs that are specific to the septage receiving, and then how much of a burden that septage imparts on all the treatment processes as you move all the way through the plant. And the current calculation uses 3 components. It uses flow, and then it uses BOD and total suspended solids. And where I think we could make some improvement, I will admit, is how much we assign value to each of those. Currently, 50% of the rate is based on the flow component. The other 50% is based on the strength, with a division between, well, it's not quite like that, but it's divided up so that the strength, I don't think, is quite as much as it should be in their rate component. But, you know, really what Steve was saying is we need to craft a rate that covers our operation and maintenance expense and our capital replacement costs. And we will have a much better indication of what those are once the new facility is online. And Andy, in previous presentations to this board, has made it very clear that our new plant will be able to handle all the septage. There should be no restriction on accepting septage, at least from our 2-3 county area. It's really a question of how do we assign the appropriate rate now that we're treating at a higher level.
Yeah, and that's certainly where that will go, and that's for a future rate analysis. You know, it's Steve, the one difference I see between in county versus out of county is that the majority of Tuolumne County has a property tax component with it that's paid to TUD. Is there a way to quantify what that, you know, tax rate is and apply that to a out of county load?
Yeah, you know, the problem, David, is again, this is designed and supposed to be a cost of service type function. The property tax we receive is what's called discretionary income. Anything we charge for water or wastewater services is required to be spent on that. Property taxes, by their nature, can be designated for different things. TUD's boards and previous TUD boards has taken all of the property tax we received and used that to basically prevent or supplement any rate increases. Other counties might use their property taxes all for water facilities. Other counties might use them for different programs they're trying to implement. They may use it for travel. They may use it for political action committees, whatever else. Here at TUD, we basically take the property tax and that's into our rate calculation. So as it stands right now, you know, about 30% of the total property tax that TUD receives is allocated to sewer. And that's just what we have done. It could be allocated 100% to water, could be 100% to somewhere else. So, you know, that's approximately $275,000 a year for Tuolumne County. So then if you look at 30% of the septage gallons are coming from how many homes in Calaveras, I mean, I would estimate that property tax differential to be thousands of dollars in the neighborhood, I don't know, less than $10,000 if I had to guess. That's just a wild estimate on my part. But I don't think the argument that the sewage coming from Calaveras County, they're not paying their fair share of property tax. You know, the property taxes in Calaveras are what, Ed? I think about 4 times what, you know, Tuolumne County is getting. because you have Forest Service land, you have these other ones. So you can make the same argument with, the Forest Service, the rimfire, and that sort of thing. They're not paying property taxes, but we're taking their sewage as well. So I hear what you're saying, but I think any kind of differential, if we were talking about, let's say, a 10% increase for Calaveras County septage, you'd probably looking in the neighborhood of about $12,000 to $14,000 a year. And it's such a minuscule amount, especially when we have this new facility in there. And I don't know how you stand behind those calculations from a cost of service perspective. Hope that helps.
Yeah, so yeah, Calaveras County has a lot more private land. So at CCWD, I'm working off of old budgets, but they get about 3 times. So they get about 3 million a year in property taxes. TUD gets about $1 million, just roughly. And I think what needs to be made clear is that is the only revenue that TUD receives that this board has full discretion on how it would like to use that revenue. When you receive your wastewater revenue, it has to be, that's why we call it an enterprise. It's restricted to wastewater. Your water, that's an enterprise. It's used for water. So the only real discretion this board has to be able to put money wherever it needs to is your property taxes. In fact, the state has threatened over the years that they're going to take away property tax revenues from special districts and reallocate it to cities and counties. And in some special districts, they've weaned rates off of property taxes in case that ever happened, because if the state did that, it would be a real hit to TUD water sewer enterprise operations. This board's talked about recreation. You can't use water sewer enterprise funds for recreation. It would have to strictly come from your property tax revenues, which it's currently being used to prop up your rates. So if you remove it from the water sewer rates, then you're going to have to increase water sewer rates to be able to do that. So at the end of the day, it's all a mass balance. So we got to be careful with that property tax. But I think the point that needs to be reiterated is that the current septage fee is designed to cover the full cost of service. So the question then becomes before this board, do you want to increase and risk losing business, whether it be in county or even just septic haulers in general? I have looked, this is not a Prop 218 issue. When we look at water sewer rates, we by law have to be cost of service. You cannot charge more cost than it costs to provide the service for water and or sewer. And so that's when we go through that analysis and do a Prop 218, we have to demonstrate that to our ratepayers. So we're a not-for-profit. But on the septic tanks hauler side, it's a fee, and it is not under California Proposition 218. Your board could just say, we want to charge more than the cost of service in the fee. And you could increase the fees, whether for all septic or you could do it just for Calaveras County. But again, at the end of the day, it's like any business with elastic prices. If you increase the cost, are you going to maintain your business? And where are we at on that elasticity curve? And does it make sense? Or are you going to risk losing revenue? So that's some of what staff has been talking about. There's not an easy answer here, but again, I think logistically it's going to be challenging at best. It's probably going to be on the honor system. And again, if the committee wants to move in this direction, I'd recommend talking to septic haulers first, get more information. But again, staff was already planning on doing a comprehensive update of this analysis with the new wastewater treatment plant. We fully intend that all rates should be cost of service, including septic haulers. And there will be new operating costs. So we have an estimate of what that new operating cost is now, but until you get 6 months under your belt, we don't know the exact amount, but we do have an estimate of what the new operating cost will be. And I'm sorry, Chair Boatright, I see the clock ticking.
The clock is ticked to that point, certainly. That I do think, we need to, bring this back around, and certainly we can go over Cal Spa at the next committee meeting for wastewater as well too. And yeah, come up with some recommendation for the board. And I don't want to hold you from your next appointment, Mr. Pat.
Going with Cal Spa, it's a good report. And Mr. Perkins, we did send out our final report to the board, so it's in your email inbox. I think Mr. Perkins wanted to talk a little more about it, so he doesn't need Eric or I. He's been overseeing it. He's real excited and happy about it. So I'd recommend let Mr. Perkins say his piece, and then if you want to know more, we can always bring both of these items back to the next wastewater committee.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Director Boatright and Director
Thank you.
Ring and everybody else.
Thanks, everyone.
Considering this late hour, I too agree that maybe we can push this off to either a regular agendized board meeting or a committee meeting or both, whichever you two prefer. And I also, just to give you a couple of minutes of this, I think it's ironic, I suppose, that both Director Boatright and Director Ringer are on this committee, because I know in each of your own way, you have a vested interest in the operations. Director Boatright, you spent 32 years, boots on the ground in every aspect of wastewater collection, treatment, and disposal, and you're an expert. So I know you have a vested interest and a hand in this report. And Director Ring, and you have been a staunch supporter of TUD and operations and staff. And you both have, I'm sure, feel this obligation, not feel, but you do have an obligation to the ratepayers and the people that voted you in here. So this was just an opportunity to really highlight some of the effort, the expert effort and response to this consent decree. And I think this topic is deserving of more time and a bigger audience. So maybe we can reschedule this, whether it's committee or full agendized board or whatever your pleasure is. But I would like the opportunity to really dwell on this in some setting.
Oh yeah, well, I maybe just one question. Or have we basically satisfied all of the requirements, with our final report for the consent decree?
Yeah, and how in spades. If this were a ball game, we would attend random in the third inning. This is an amazing report, and if all those questions that you have and just asked are contained within this report, and I was just simply going to highlight some of the obvious ones, but yes.
And that's very good to hear. That we're at that point. I would certainly like to, see a report to the whole board, maybe, sometime in the next 3 meetings or so, that the whole board and public can actually understand and realize how comprehensive this Cal Spa decree was, and what an accomplishment it is to get to the final report and basically be finished with that, but not finished with our continued new processes that have been incorporated along the way. So,
right. Thank you.
Okay, Director Boatright, just a couple of clarifications for item number 3. Was there no committee recommendation on that one?
I believe we'd like to revisit that and start the format to something that can go back to the full board for approval on the rates on that.
Okay, so you want to bring it back to the Wastewater Committee for continued discussion.
Right, continued discussion on that, and the Cal Spa. If Mr. Ringen's in agreement with sending that as a report to the full board sometime in the next couple, 2 or 3 board meetings.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I've followed that thing from the very ugly beginning, and I'm glad that we're almost home base. The only thing I'd like to suggest to Dawn is when, and I'm not trying to pile work on you, but I think it would be really informative and interesting. I mean, when that hit, our sewer system was in definite need. And we were forced to do things that have been put off for years. And so that part of it was good in a way. I mean, it's been expensive, but at least now it's been addressed. But I'd like to see, I think it would be really good for the rest of the board to see not only how much has been accomplished, but how this is going to get handled in the future so that we don't ever fall back into that condition, and how much is still left to be done. I mean, I don't need to know down to the foot or anything like that, but I just think, you know, a little discussion on that would really be good for the whole board to know.
I totally agree, and that's why I asked. I just think this is worthy of a full board and the public that's interested. And I do plan on summing it all up with those final comments, Director Ringen. But quickly in a nutshell, and David will, or Director Boatwright will understand this, but there was a time when there wasn't a lot, you know, the wastewater division was a second thought. It just didn't get the full attention that it deserved. So this forced TUD to reckon itself, and we responded perfectly, and we won't slow down. So rest assured.
All right, very good. Looking forward to giving that the pomp and circumstance that it
Yes,
deserves.
thank you.
But, all right, so that will bring us to the end of our agendized items. Thank you all very much for participating. I think it was, you know, very informative.
Yeah, thank you guys.